Welcome to the Jeff Knows Inc. Entrepreneurial Podcast with your host, Jeff Lopes. Jeff has over 2 decades experience as a serial entrepreneur, building brands like Kimura from his home basement to a multi-million-dollar global brand that has sold over 250,000 pairs of boxing gloves. Jeff's here to educate, guide, and drive you on the process of bringing your ideas and dreams to reality with the inspiring stories from some of the top business minds.
Welcome to episode number 35 of the Jeff Knows Inc. show. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. I'm so excited to have on today the founder of the W.M. Brown Project magazine, the author of A Man in His Watch, and soon to be released, A Man in His Car, Matt Hranek. Sit back and enjoy this podcast, everyone. We are live on the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. We got a special guest from upstate New York. Am I correct there?
Originally from Binghamton.
There you go. Matt Hranek. Matt is a world traveler, got a couple books out, amazing Instagram feed. We got tons of things to talk about today. I'm so excited to have him on. Matt, say hello to our audience.
Hi, everybody.
I always start up by getting to the audience kind of know who our guests are. Just let's run down who you are and what you're kind of doing right now, kind of the 2020 Matt and where you are in your life.
Well, the quick Matt Hranek elevator pitch resume is I have been in New York for the last 25 some years, mostly in, what got me here was photography, media, and the magazine business. I grew up in upstate New York, went to university in upstate New York, studied photography, and I just wanted to be around that world. So I found my way into New York, pursued photography. That led to, starting this blog and then creating this television show, and then eventually settling back into the magazine world at Condé Nast, where my wife was a creative director at Traveler, and that gave me a great opportunity to be more of a kind of content focused rather than production focused. And then as that kind of was disintegrating and digital was changing the landscape and the media landscape, we left to start our own magazines, and that was being William Brown Magazine, which was being supported by the kind of digital dialogue with Instagram. And that's where I am today, right now. And in the meantime, in between those two things, I wrote a watch book called A Man in His Watch, and now A Man in His Car is coming out. So, and the development of those ideas where it was about being exposed to all these great people and all these great stories that I met along the way of, working in the magazine world. So this is the kind of like residual content from that. But it's been a really fun journey, and I'm happy to be doing something that I really love. Which
is the dream of every entrepreneur, right? To pursue your passion. The whole photography world, is that something as a young boy growing up in New York, something you always visualize yourself doing, or is something just as you got into university, it just became more of a passion?
No, it was all my life. My father was a commercial artist, sign painter, very serious amateur photographer. And he had his own business, and he was just into gear. And I just remember him giving, I always say like I was a lousy, I couldn't draw, right? I still can't draw. And I think my dad sensed that creative frustration and was like, hey, why don't you try this thing? And he gave me one of his old Pentax 35 millimeters. And I just fell in love with it. I mean, there was not a moment in high school, junior high school, there wasn't a camera on my neck. And then when I decided to go to university, I was like, I really want to pursue this in a more professional status. And, and that's when I went to RIT and studied photography there.
Yeah. So with the photography, were you always freelancing, or did you actually work for a magazine or anything at the beginning when you first started?
Jeff, I've always said, like, I've never had a real job my entire life. I always was a freelancer, which also means that I lost my job every single day. So you get very kind of resilient, and you kind of find this kind of emotional armor against that because, you got to muscle on to the next one. Yeah. But being a freelancer offered me a lot of opportunities and variety that I don't think I would have had if I just, had a kind of 9-to-5 in-house job.
Yeah. With your, okay, let's get into a couple of things. WM Brown Project. Where did the name come from? Let's start with that.
So basically, that is the name. The quick story is that's the name of this farm we have in upstate New York, which was part of a bigger farm, this big dairy farm.
When you say we, this is family owned?
My Yolanda and I.
Okay.
So my wife, Yolanda.
Yeah.
And so when we first got married, we were kind of looking for a vacation escape. We're looking for the contrast of what we were experiencing in New York, which was like living on top of each other and everyone.
Yeah, of course.
So I grew up about an hour from there. I found this property, and it was on William Brown Road, WM Brown Road. And when I started writing the blog, I was like, what the hell are we going to name this thing? And I was like, well, we decided, well, why don't we call it the William Brown Project? So because a lot of the dialogue of what I was doing in the blog was about city mouse, country mouse, and how these worlds collide and what the contrast is. And it just kind of stuck. And then William Brown became this other little entity that, could be me, or maybe it wasn't me. And then and that sort of gained footing, and that kind of developed into a little TV show called Alternate Route that was on the very short-lived Esquire network. And it was about
how long was that TV show airing on the Esquire network?
It was one season, so we did 6 shows, and basically it was like bringing the blog to life, which was a lot of fun. It was, travel, lifestyle. There was, food-centric car, interesting characters. It was a lot of fun to do, and it was like a master class in television creation, but they had a slew of problems, and things were moving very, very fast in new media, and they were just left in the dirt.
What year was this on?
Oh my God, this was 4 years ago, Yolanda? Sorry, Yolanda's sitting across from me. Fill me in with the facts. Alternate Route was 2016.
It was probably 5 years ago.
Yeah, about 5 years ago now. It was a terrific idea. Like Esquire Network was kind of building this cable channel that was about kind of, for kind of smart guys. Like it wasn't dumbed down stuff. It was, clever, smart content. And then they realized that most people watching television want stupid, dumbed down content.
Yeah.
And it kind of fell apart.
7 years ago.
It was almost 7 years ago now. But I thought we did a terrific job at it. And I thought the content was really clever and accessible and high-low. And I don't know, I had always taken inspiration from Jacques Pepin cooking shows and the early Bourdain stuff. And
I was going to dive into that. When I first saw your Instagram feed, that was the first thing that popped in my head was, and he's obviously passed now, but I was a massive fan of Anthony. And that's just something it for some reason interacted and connected with myself when I saw your content. I found it very almost, it was on the same level, which I found it's more of an upscale, more, like you said, more intellectual, more just, you have to understand it and to appreciate it. So did you find any inspiration from Anthony?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm very flattered that you make that comparison because early on, I think when I first found No Reservation, of course I knew his restaurant Layal, Kitchen Confidential was a big impact on me. And because I love books about food, first of all. Yeah. Right? So, I pretty much only ever read like cookbook. I don't read any nonfiction. I don't read any fiction. It's mostly all nonfiction and cooking based. So when I first saw those shows, I was like, oh my God, that is so cool. Like a travel show that's about food, that's about, those relationships and contrasts. And so I would say, I had been influenced by television much earlier than that with like cooking shows like Jacques Pepin and the Galloping Gourmet and Floyd on Food and all these kind of great characters that was basically reality non-scripted, but
100%.
Bourdain brought in a much more layers. And then as we know, it became more politicized. And to be honest with you, like I got bored when it got politicized. Like,
yeah, I did at the end, got very politicized. Very much so.
I went to him I go to television for distraction most of the time, unless I am watching news, which is then just depressing me. So,
100%.
But anyway, there was a big influence, of course, in all that stuff. And I really enjoyed it. And I had this amazing production team and who basically just let me do exactly what we wanted to do, which was a great gift.
So with the passion of food, is this something, the culinary world, did you study it at all, or is this just something you're just picking up and learning on your own and stuff like that?
Well, I grew up in a big Italian family on my mom's side. Like my
Okay.
mom,
Yeah.
one of 11, right? You cannot escape that in your DNA.
Yeah.
So I grew up, my uncle had 2 restaurants. My aunt had this amazing diner. I grew up in those places.
And this is all in New York State?
Yeah, all in Binghamton, New York, where I grew up.
Yeah.
Which was a big immigrant community there, right? There was mounds of Italians immigrated there after, in the 1920s, 1930s, and also a lot of Eastern Europeans. So like my last name is Czech. My father's family was like Slovak, Czech, Russian, Eastern European, and my mother's Italian. It was this great mash of cultures, and a lot of that culture was food focused. So it just, I don't know, it just became a part of me.
I want to dive into one thing. We're going to I apologize. We're going to be just jumping in where my mind goes and then ask you some questions. I'm a huge car guy, and I was on your website and I saw you were at the Le Mans, and that's something I've always wanted to experience. What was your experience there? How did that all start, that journey, and what was your experience there?
Well, we were in France, spending the summer in France. We have a little house in the southwest of France, and we were kind of traveling around. We were in Paris, and I said, oh, the Le Mans Classic is going on right now, which is a collection of all the classic Le Mans cars.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And so we jumped on a train and took the train down to Le Mans. I remember it was like 150 degrees. It was like sunny. It was so hot, but it was so cool. It's just like, it feels like 10 square miles of like just classic race cars, like Jaguar E-types and Ferraris and old Bugattis and you know, then they had these tents where they broke out all the eras of cars, so you could like go see the 1940s tent and the 1950s tent and it just was so amazing and very emotional there. Like it was pretty intense. And I mean, I have been to the Daytona, the 24 Hours of Daytona with modern cars.
Yeah.
And I've been to modern races, including F1, but there's something about those classic cars.
The history behind them is amazing.
I mean, you get really choked up when you see like a field of vintage Jaguars, like going down the tarmac, you know, it's great. It's great.
Where's your passion with cars? I saw, that was one thing I threw a comment on you the other day. You had the 87 Porsche. Is this something you collect, or is this something?
You know, I think when you're growing up, you know, there's a lot, like watches, like cars kind of tell a little bit of a story of how you see your life, who you are, how you present yourself, stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up in upstate New York. Most of my cousins were driving muscle cars. Like there was always some like beater Firebird or Camaro. Like I think about those cars now. I was like, why didn't they hold on to those cars? Like
it's
the Camaro.
Funny. You know, I'm going to jump in there quickly. When I was 16, I bought a 79 Camaro, and I was all into drag racing back then. I was 16, and when I got out of that little phase, I wanted to sell the car. My mom's like, you know, we got space and we got tons of space here. We'll just keep it here. And throughout the years, I just left it, didn't touch it. And married, I got 2 kids now, 14 and 12-year-old. And 4 years ago, my mom's like, hey, the car's still here. You got time in your hands, just restore it. And I did a full restoration on it.
Wow.
And it's just a little summer fun car now. It's a 79 Camaro. So it's funny you said that. Like I want
to see a picture of that.
I'll send it to you.
You know, it was interesting because, you know this, like those cars were sitting on blocks and people's driveways for years. My cousins would buy them, fix them up. They never looked good, but they ran fast.
Yeah.
And then I had a couple other cousins that, you know, I had a lot of cousins. So, who were working, and they were buying brand new GTOs off the lot and brand new Firebirds and Trans Ams off the lot and driving those cars around. And I was just surrounded by that. My dad loved British sports cars, and he loved foreign cars. And I guess in the 80s, like I was a kid of the 80s, you know, I just gravitated to that 911. You know, I had a poster in my room. That was my dream car, you know, was that. And then about 20 years ago, this is the fast story, and you could read this in detail in the book, but Yolanda and I were, an ex-boyfriend of Yolanda loaned us that car, and we took the car from San Francisco and we drove it to Palm Springs and eloped in the car. And then a few years after that, I mean, that Porsche was kind of just disintegrating on the street in front of his house. And we were putting this deal together for some house project he was working on. And he was like, well, what do you want for this project? And I was like, I want that car. And he was like, really? Like the Targa roof was falling apart. There was mushrooms growing in the back seat because the car had been left outside. And he's like, really? You want the car? I said, yeah, that's what I want out of the deal. So I bought it. I got it from him, right? We did the trade. I kept it in San Francisco for a while because I had been working out there photographing for, Pottery Barn and Williams Sonoma. And I was doing projects like that. So I kept the car, slowly brought it back up to speed. And then a few years after that, shipped it out east. And that's 20 years ago.
Yeah. Time flies, huh?
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. I'm a Porsche guy. I've always, you set goals for yourself. And when I was 18, I said, and it hasn't happened, unfortunately, life has just been hectic. But I always said my 40th birthday present would be a 911. And as every year, and my wife screams at me all the time. She goes, just buy. But I always say, okay, I got a little money aside. I'm going to buy a property. I keep investing. I keep passing it. And my wife, it was funny because a couple of days ago, we just had this lecture. She goes, okay, when are you going to buy? Just buy it. Life's so short. You've been whining it for so long, just buy it. So that's something over the next little while. I'll be picking one up, and nothing crazy, just like yours, like probably 90s and probably 997 or something like that. And just something to enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, what I like about the slightly more modern air-cooled Porsches is that, like this 87 of mine, I haven't done a service on that car really in 20 years. And I just finally had the opportunity to work with a garage in upstate New York called Churchill Classics. And they were like, let's go over the car and let's see what it needs. And it was like little things, like some dried out shock bushings and some exhaust issues. But like, it really is a very reliable,
they're very reliable cars.
Yeah.
They're enjoyable too.
I always have one stinky, difficult car in rotation, even if it's a vintage truck or Jeep or 4x4, or we have this VW up there, and it's fun to like smell gasoline and have a mild breakdown and remind yourselves of this kind of analog mechanical world.
Are you a Jeep guy?
I always loved Jeeps, and I bought years ago a 1946 Willys Jeep that
beautiful.
Some old timer found in a field and restored. And when it was restored, he was like, "What am I going to do with this now?" And we bought it, and we ran it around upstate at the farm for a while. But it was in really great shape, and I just was like, "Now let's flip it on for the next thing," kind of thing.
Yeah.
So.
I'm currently driving a Jeep. I've had a Jeep for a few years now. They're enjoyable. They're fun.
Great cars, yeah.
Magazine print. I was reading obviously on your website, and it's something it's pretty obvious. The print world is taken a hit over the last little decade or so. But I appreciate it. I love sitting down and just grabbing a magazine and feeling it in my hands, or even grabbing a book. We talk about this all the time with guests. I'm a type of person where I love reading. I love holding a book in my hands. I love grabbing a highlighter and highlighting parts of the book and going back and seeing passages in the book. And when I want to remind myself of something, your passion is obviously for the magazine. When did a magazine all start, and where's your vision for it?
So the magazine basically started just over a year ago, and it was really in response to watching all these magazines that I cared so much about in the legacy world just disintegrating, falling apart. Mm-hmm. The printing was poor. There was no more emphasis on imagery. Like it just got sloppy and commercial and was pandering to advertisers and And then also there was this idea that like, where was that one magazine that spoke to every version of myself, that talked about cars, talked about food, travel, and style, not fashion, but about style and interesting characters, blah, blah, blah. Well, it didn't exist under one roof. So we decided to make that. And I was so lucky to have Yolanda around. She's Condé Nast creative director for years, and she helped me build it. And I tapped into resources of, very talented friends who were writers and photographers, and called in favors and said, "Hey, listen, I want to build this thing, and I need your content and your point of view and your talent to do that." And everyone was like, "Whatever you need." And that was the first issue. And then we built the second issue, and then it started gaining momentum, and people were paying attention to it. And then advertisers were interested in investing in it. And then it just kind of, and now we're on issue 5. And in the meantime, Yolanda was building her reaction to the magazine business, which is YOLO Journal, which is a, very in-depth, very specific view on travel. So together we kind of like building these in the same streamline.
So Yolanda is doing a print as well, print magazine as well.
It's
very interesting. Okay.
YOLO Journal. And so, and again, you in the same kind of philosophy in terms of how it was being built. Like, we have this amazing Rolodex of friends and talent that really don't have outlets anymore in the traditional sense. And again, like I'm like you, I want to pick something up. I don't want to have to charge it. I don't want it backlit. I could dump a drink on it if it happens, then you just kind of shake it off, go back to it. And I think that philosophically, that's how I wanted the magazine. That was the magazine I was looking for. So we built it.
With the magazine in general, are you doing any of the photography yourself, writing yourself? Is it more?
I am. I stopped really taking commercial assignments, and this sort of started at Traveler when I was an editor there and I was traveling with Yolanda. We were watching the disintegration of that, right? So budgets were disappearing. No one could afford to do photo shoots and be in exotic locations. So what we did was, if we went on a vacation, we would bring material, bring objects, bring clothes, bring stuff, and we would photograph it and build the stories. Well, that's essentially what we're doing here too. Like, if I can't get it shot, I shoot it. If we can't get it written, we write it. Like, I always had to be a kind of scrappy, guy of all trades, wearing many hats. And the magazine has forced us to even be more focused on that. And it is very rewarding. This, like,
100%.
When you're doing something for yourself, much different experience. So to be able to, like, for the summer issue, we were locked down in isolation. We had an idea for the summer issue. I was like, how the hell are we going to get this done? Like, how are we going to get this done? Like, we can't go anywhere. We can't be near anyone. And we figured it out. And we figured it out in a safe, clever way. And the summer issue looks like you're on the beach in Brittany or Normandy, but it's like 20 minutes from my house on Jacob Riis Beach in like Brooklyn. And, so that scrappiness and being able to have the materials to get this stuff done has been a real asset, specifically during this time.
Your magazines are coming out every 2 months, give or take?
Basically, we look at it like seasonal.
Okay.
So winter, spring, summer, fall is the kind of idea, because I didn't want to like back myself into a corner saying like, oh, every March this thing has to come out, or every fall on October 1. I wanted to be able to have flexibility, because, we're basically doing this all ourselves. So we needed that flexibility to get them done. So it was just like, let's talk about seasons and let's date them in this idea of seasons.
Let's dive into your first book, A Man and His Watch. When did that all start coming together? What year was that? And obviously you have a passion for watches as well. So how did that all come about?
So that came about because I was covering the watch market for Condé Nast Traveler.
Yeah.
And because that was a big part of their business, the luxury watch groups. So in that world, I started navigating it. I always was into watches, and I just was like meeting the most interesting characters and the most interesting brands. And there was these incredible stories. And, I'd been talking with Artisan about doing some kind of book. We didn't know what it was. I couldn't stay focused. And I would come back from these trips or these events or these meetings with all these watch guys, and I would tell Yolanda these stories. Like, I was like, oh my God, this story is so crazy. And the archives of Cartier are so intense. And Yolanda was like, maybe this is your book. And I was like, yeah, maybe that is the book. So I teamed up with a very good photographer friend of mine, Steve Lewis, who's a still life photographer. I knew I couldn't execute it like he could. We shot a little test. We built the idea. And then I approached the publisher and I said, listen, I want to do this watch book. And they said, no way. We're not doing a watch book. We already turned that project down. We're not interested in a watch book. I said, but it's not a watch book. It's a story book. The stories just happen to be about watches. And I think it should be approached this way. And we already had examples of the photography, which hadn't been done before on this format. Like, they were raw, and they showed patina, and they showed age, and they had storytelling in the imagery. And they said, okay, let's give it a go. Let's try it. And I had a meeting with them not too long ago, and they looked at me and there was like, there are no words to describe how successful this book is. Like, we would never imagined it would be as successful as it is. And I think it was because it came from an honest, emotional place of storytelling about these things. It wasn't just like the world's most expensive watch, So I think that's
a lost art too, the storytelling.
Well, that's all I know,
It is something that you should be very credited with, because it's a lost art, and it's something that I guess I'm 43, our younger generation don't appreciate. They want everything now. They don't want to hear the history of it. They just want to know it and get it in their hands. So understanding the history of something is something that a lot of people have kind of lost, and I appreciate. So I appreciate what you've done with that.
Yeah. I mean, I always loved I grew up in a big family with a lot of interesting characters, and, a lot of the time I just, shut your mouth, keep your head down and listen. Yeah. And I always appreciated a great storyteller. And I think that made me pay attention to those people who had good stories to tell.
When did the book come out? What year?
A Man and His Watch came out 2 years ago.
Okay. A Man and His Cars, your new project, has that been released yet, or is that still in print?
No, but you want to see something?
Yeah. Chief Rubber. I love it.
That's the cover. So
love it.
So this is the mock-up of the sleeve.
Beautiful.
So we did it in lead.
It's even your that's very similar to your first one, right?
Yeah, we kind of wanted to package them together. Yeah, like keep the formats the same. We changed the materials. Like, I wanted this to be, more tactile, and I wanted it to be more car-like. So the idea was like, can we have like a leather a sleeve, and can the letters be slightly bright like chrome? And so we found this like amazing vegetable leather and this kind of slightly more bright foil print on it. But the idea is that they kind of work together as a team, and I've been working on this thing for almost 2 years now.
So these are stories you've obviously accumulated over the years. Friends, yeah. Or are these actually associates, friends, or just people you've worked with in the industry? Well,
it was the same approach as the watch book, which is again was like, what is this emotional connection we have to cars? Like, what is this storytelling? What is the personal journey with these things, and what do they say about us? And so I knew I had a wish list of people that I wanted to talk to. There are some carryovers from watch to car, because those kind of characters are intertwined.
100%, yeah.
And then again, like running into stories, going to archives, approaching brands and saying, like, approaching a company like Ford and saying, like, the world changed. Henry Ford produced the first car. Like, that changed the course of the world, and that changed manufacturing. And they had and so the book, in essence, is sort of my vision, my personal point of view of how cars affected my life. Because the reality is, this, I missed 150,000 stories, I'm sure, but we had to cap it on something, and we had to find a lane. And so this is my kind of, my edit of things of cars that made impressions on me as I kind of grew up.
Is it like you said, so you have a little of everything, a little American muscle in there, a little European in there?
Yeah. Little muscle, European stuff, weird, obscure, nutty, crazy 4x4 stuff, classic Land Rovers. We have multi-gazillion-dollar cars in there, and then like a 2,000 euro Fiat Panda, it's like but I would say the consistent thread is the passion that the people that own these cars and are around these cars. And I don't care if it's a, $2 million Bugatti or the Fiat Panda, the connection is the same.
Yeah. 100%. When is your hope release date for this book?
It'll be out in October.
So just before Christmas, perfect timing.
Yeah. And it's at the printer right now. We've just been, in the final design stages. Also through this period that we're all separated, like it was a real challenge. Art directors, production teams, all like FedExing stuff all over the country, and then having it to the printer. But it's on track. It'll be out in October.
Let's dive into that pandemic in New York. You guys got hit pretty hard and getting a little relapse again, I guess, right through the US. Where's your mindset with that all?
I mean, it's been, the isolating, the beginning of all of this, I actually took in stride in a really great way, because that house that we built in upstate New York, William Brown Farm, like the whole point of that house and that place was to be isolated. That was always my fantasy of that place, was to be away from people and the craziness of the city. And
how many acres you guys have up there?
Like 130 acres. And we're at the end of a dead end road. My closest neighbor is like about a mile down the road, like full-time neighbor.
Yeah.
And, we are set up there. Like we have like chest freezers and great pantry and, plenty of toilet paper and like, like and it's a very well, the big challenge for us up there was we had, crap for Wi-Fi up there.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest challenge for me. But in terms of being away and navigating all of this there, I really found it to be a very inspiring time. And, cooked a lot, kept food journals, started creating these little drink videos, trying to find the folly and the kind of silver lining in all this, and be optimistic was really my objective.
With Instagram, you've taken like that is that your persona? Is that you? Is it more of a, how do you explain it? But the persona, is it something you're trying to create as a character? Or is that actually you every day? How do you perceive that?
I mean,
I'm sure you've been asked this before.
Unfortunately, it is the reality of who I am. Like okay. I'm always been that kid. I don't think, come on. Instagram frames a very specific world. Like
100%
I'm showing you the best version of everything in my life. I'm not wasting your time. Like Instagram for me should be fun and folly and full stop. That's it. So, but no, it's really me. Like it's a version of myself, but I always loved, even when I was a kid, I used to do like fake cooking shows and pretend I had a TV audience. Yeah. And now I actually have a kind of TV audience. That's all that kind of, it's been fun. And I think it's been really well received. And I'm very fortunate that, negativity is at a real low on my engagement on Instagram, and I actually really enjoy the engagement in the community and the dialogue with people, and how all over the world we find this commonality and this common thread of likes, and I really love that. I think it's a great tool to get your message out, and a great tool to kind of meet like-minded people.
Yeah, and it's a great way to obviously advertise yourself, right? In a way, you're letting people know who you are, and it all falls together with your books and your lifestyle and your publication and all that stuff. So it all works hand in hand, right? And you got some, and obviously with your background in photography, your imagery is amazing, your video quality is good. So it's a good experience for somebody to watch. Like you know how it is with social media, you get lost. You could literally spend hours just watching videos. And the other day I was just going through, just trying to learn a bit more about you. And I'm just watching your videos, and I'm watching the next video, and I'm watching the next video. And they're entertaining. And that's why I was asking, is this actually you? Is it more of a persona you're trying to create? But I love it. You're doing really well with it. So congratulations on that aspect of it.
Thank you.
With your books, like I said, they go hand in hand. Is this something that you're going to try to continue on the next thing? Do you have any more ideas, or something that you want to say, hey, I want to bring it up to 4 or 5 different man and his whatever, man and his dog. Like, is there something?
These first two, I think, were very easy for me because they both selfishly start with a very specific personal story.
Mhm.
My personal watch story, then my car story. And I have very, very lovely, smart, supportive publishers at Artisan. And we've been thinking about it. What is the third one? The third one is like all over the place. And then you have to sort of think about, do you need a third one? Visually, how do we respond if we do a man and his drink? Like, does the world need that? Like, you know what I mean? So right now I'm focusing on man and his car. And then we're just got to see organically if something else happens. And if it stops here with these two, I feel really good that these were very kind of strong points of view, which I think you need. I think you need 100%. A strong point of view with it, or it just is kind of flat and kind of gets boring. Like if I'm not, I'll tell you this about me. Like if I'm not 100% into the idea, like if I can't completely digest it and be a part of it.
If the passion's not there.
If the passion's not there, I just fall flat.
Yeah. Well, that's most, I mean, you're very artistic, right? And most artists have that same feeling, right? If they don't have the passion for it, even entrepreneurs, if you don't have the passion for it, it becomes a job. It's not being an entrepreneur at that point, right?
Right. And these books are, they're not jobs. I don't find them to be a burden,
So your magazine, where do you see it going over the next, say, 5 years?
I feel, and I think Yolanda feels the same way about her magazine, is that, they become this format for other things. So this is the base. This is the starting point for bigger dialogues. And I think those dialogues are like brand engagement and brand collaborations and this idea of this lifestyle that if you want to kind of get on board and kind of ride that train, like we want to include all of you. Like we love this idea of building community and family under an idea of this inclusive idea, not that we're, putting up walls of exclusivity. This is about like, how do we all, move forward together in a successful way. And I've been really lucky straight away to have, the first brands to be attracted to the magazine were brands that I was already in love with. So for them to be like, how do we work together? And I'm like, oh, this is easy because I've already been a fan. And I love the collaboration process. And I love the idea of like messaging, building brand messaging together for a specific audience. William Brown never had it. I never needed it to be everything for everybody. It needs to be just this thing for a reasonably niche group of people. And I think that kind of audience focus is, I think, what a lot of brands are interested in now.
I know what it is, but tell the audience, what is your target audience with the magazine?
So I would say it's definitely skews men. Mm-hmm. And I would say it's like, 8 to 80, like I really, and I think it's, I don't think it's a specific socioeconomic group. I just feel it's a group of guys that kind of see the world a certain way. And that is like through the eyes of a simple drink, a grilled steak, a reasonably sporty car, appreciates cold canned beer, like a Labatt's Light, which is one of my favorites, and to understand how to like savor a bottle of champagne. Like it is those kind of like the things that the kind of frivolity and fun that we navigate, but also I think there's an interesting kind of moral compass, and I think
is fashion a part of it as well?
I think I always appreciated men who had great style. Okay. And I don't think that was dependent on current trends. So when I think of fashion, I think fashion is current trend. When I think style, I think about, I don't know, that hip hop kid in the subway that has put together a kind of amazing group of color and style, and bringing in urban influences, as well as like the old Milanese Italian taxi driver who somehow could wear like a cardigan and a fishing vest and like look like the coolest guy you've ever seen. Like, or like my dad who basically went to work in like Levi's and boots and a Barracuda jacket, like dressed on the weekends in like Harris tweed and, you know, Sanders boots and a mock turtleneck, like it was just, I like guys that have navigated and found their stride with
their own style.
And you know, and that could be a V-neck white t-shirt and a pair of jeans. Like, but I think style comes with confidence, and that's confidence in yourself more than anything else.
I love that. I love how you brought that up. I years back, and that's where my navigated to watch. I have a huge watch collection myself, and a gentleman, we had a like almost like a board meeting. This is, God, I was probably at 22, 23. So you're looking almost 20 years ago, and everybody was all well dressed and everybody had suits on, a lot of execs, a lot of doctors, lawyers in this meeting. And so it was for a charity event we were running. And just one guy walks in, pair of ripped jeans, white t-shirt, but he had the nicest pair of clean sneakers on and this beautiful watch. And he just commanded the room with his confidence. And when he was done, we had a long conversation, and he goes, rule number one, always have a nice watch and a nice pair of shoes on. And be confident, and you command, and everybody will take attention to you. And I've always had that in my back of my head, and I've always my shoes, my watch, or something I've always focused on since then. It's over 20 something years, right? So I love that. It's that confidence when you do in your own style,
right? Like I always hated the idea of dress code. Like,
yeah,
what I like that schlub in an ill-fitting suit and tie is more acceptable than like me in a pair of like, you know, vintage 501s, loafers, and a, you know, cashmere turtleneck and a tweed jacket. Like, what are we talking about? Let's talk about discretion and how, you know, people are presenting themselves. Let's not like just create these kind of cookie cutter rules about stuff. And, you know, and to get back to like me being on this, you know, the days I was riding the subway very, very often, is like, I loved clocking all this kind of weird, eccentric style. Like even though I know like I could never pull that off, like I really always appreciated like, you know, how people of confidence kind of put their personal style together. I mean, I would say with William Brown, it picks a very specific lane. Like I'm a preppy guy from upstate New York who now looks at kind of Italian and English style as like the benchmark for like who I am. I think it's classic, it's timeless, it's kind of evergreen. So that, again, selfishly, that's what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. But, you know, when I look at some, you know, like style publications, let's say in France, and it's like some kind of, again, some great looking skinny guy with like killer sneakers, blue jeans, and a trench coat over a t-shirt, I'm like, damn, that looks amazing, you know? Yeah. So I'm definitely keen on recognizing it all. But I think with William Brown, again, it's very opinionated, and it's sort of my point of view and opinion, you know? So it's not meant to, it's just, that's what I know. And I can't pretend to be that,
I appreciate that. You're being honest with it.
Yeah. Did you see the last cover?
Yeah, I did see it. I was looking at all that. Yeah. How thick are your magazine? How many pages do you put in there? They look pretty thick.
You have like around 130 pages.
It's almost like a book, huh?
Well, the whole idea about this thing is like there's no cover lines.
Yeah.
The stories and the interior content is like, it's not newsy. It's they're fast, digestible reads. They're things that you can put down and come back to and not feel like. I always felt so guilty when I had a subscription to the New Yorker that I was like, or even the Economist. I was just like, I felt so guilty that I couldn't get through it. And I promised myself, like, there should be no guilt around this. Like, you could read one article, 500 words, look at some nice pictures, put it down and revisit it without having to feel guilty about it. Yeah. And I guess that came out of my own laziness of like, I'm such a I'm just not a quick reader. I'm just a slow, digestible reader.
I'm very similar to that.
So philosophically, that's again how I wanted to approach the words and the story content.
Through this whole conversation, you've mentioned your father quite a bit.
Yeah.
What an influence, and is your father still with us?
No, my father passed when I was actually quite young. He passed away when I was 18. So he was quite young. He was in his 40s. But he made a very, very big impression on me in terms of how he pursued his life, his career, how he styled himself, how he drove, how he parented, how he was a husband, like that. It was a very deep impression that I had at a young age. So I feel that, sure, I was robbed of that, but I think there was such an intense impression at a young age that, it stays with me quite.
Yeah, there a lot of it molded who you are as a man.
Yeah. And I think philosophically,
awesome.
when you lose somebody that was very important to you, and I think maybe you grab onto that a little bit more aggressively and hold onto it and not forget any of that stuff because that's all you have.
Yeah.
But I would say my dad was a pretty William Brown kind of character.
Yeah, that's awesome. I always ask all our guests a question, and I'm going to run it through you and just give a raw answer. If you were to pass away today, how would you want to be described in a few words by your closest friends?
Enthusiastic, kind, sensitive, funny, irreverent, and available.
Available. Okay. That's very good. And watches. What's your favorite watch?
Get back to my dad, right? Like all those influences you have as a kid. Like I loved Rolex. I just loved it.
Yeah.
I loved that period when I was growing up.
It's a sense of stature too, right?
Yeah. Like when I remember my dad, we would go to this one kind of, we were not members of this club, but we would be invited to this country club. And my dad would say like, you see that watch over there? That's a Rolex. It's a Rolex Datejust in two-tone, And I just remember that. And then I think when my father when he went into business and started his own studio and he became successful at it, I remember coming home and on his wrist was this stainless steel black dial Rolex Datejust. And before that, it was like a plastic pulsar, And I was like, what is that? And he was like, it's Rolex, And, I like that how Rolex designed watches for purpose, and like the Submariner really was for divers, and the GMT was for airline pilots. And so I found that I kind of developed a taste for watches that had design purpose. Like today I'm wearing an Omega Speedmaster. Why? Because I loved astronauts in the space program, and that's what they wore. And I think the styling suited my style tastes. So, yes. Do I want a complicated Patek? Yes. Do I want a Panerai? Yes. Could I just spend my life like pursuing the best version of all these brands? Sure. But again, like I have to pick the lane.
Yeah. What about vehicles, cars? You have your Porsche now. Do you have a dream car, or is it something or a car in the past you've had that you wish you could get back?
My first car was this 1971 BMW Bavaria, the two-door. It was automatic, which was kind of strange for that BMW. And I loved BMWs. I was a huge BMW fan. I bought it from my uncle for like $1,200. My brother and I drove it into the ground. There's a part of me that like still thinks like I'd like to get that Bavaria or that, and I also had a 2002 in my life again. Yeah. I think I own my dream car. That was the poster I had in my room, was that 911 Targa. I own it. I'm very lucky to own that. I'm always setting goals and sights on cars. Like, would I love a Ferrari Dino? Yes, all day long. Is that going to be realistic in my life? No. But I think that I love Land Rovers. My daily driver is a Land Rover.
Yeah.
I just think they're magical, incredible cars. And even I have a modern one, which I really like. So,
have you owned more historical Land Rovers?
I've had in my possession a Series 3, 1970s Series 3.
Yeah.
And now I have a 1964 Series 2A that it's sort of too good to hold on to, so we're selling that. I'm in the middle of selling that right now. But I think the next vintage Land Rover, what I think I would ideally do, because these older ones are just like slow. They drive like tractors. They're very kind of aesthetically pleasing, but they're not ideal. Would be to take a slightly more vintage one
and modernize it.
Yeah, put a modern diesel engine in, better suspension, power steering. Like, don't strip the life out of it. Like, it doesn't have to be in saddle leather and all that, but just a better driving experience. So we'll see. And right now, my daughter is Clara is 17, and I want her more into cars. So we were driving down the street the other day, and she said, "What is that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's a Mercedes 380 SL." And the roof was off and everything. She's like, "I really like that car." And of course, like, I immediately started searching the internet and trying to find one for us to drive, because I always loved that car too.
Yeah.
I mean, I was more of a 450 SL guy, but anyway, I mean, so I just love cars, and
you love experiencing different cars. I can see.
Yeah. From American muscle to, slow British tractor trucks.
How many children do you have?
I have one daughter, Clara.
17. Yeah. So she's a young lady already. Heading to university soon, or college, or?
She has a senior year here in Brooklyn. Yeah. At school here. And then I guess we start navigating college as soon as we get through this mess of,
Yeah.
Nice to have some non-virtual college tours.
Yeah. It's my daughter's 14. So she's graduated grade 8, going to high school, and in Ontario, we had the school year was a complete mess with the PA days, with the teachers had a strike. And with the pandemic, everything, they probably got about 2.5 months of school this year, which is ridiculous. And it was her big graduation year. And she was supposed to go on this big school trip to Ottawa, which is about a 6-hour drive, and stay there for the weekend. And it was just whole things planned, and everything was shabocked. And it was just, it's so sad seeing, right? Her graduation was a virtual graduation.
Yeah.
And we weren't even aware, like, it was a virtual graduation. Obviously, then as it was going on, she got awarded 2 awards. We're like, oh my God. And then she got awarded honor roll, and we weren't even aware she was on the honor roll. So it was all positive stuff, but it was just like, she's going to high school, and it's like she almost feels not prepared for it. So it's like that little fear, right? And what high school is going to be, right? I don't know how it is up in New York State now, but in Ontario, here in Toronto, Canada, they're looking at splitting this school into half virtual, half in class starting September. Which is, the kids are not learning nothing virtual. They're not learning nothing. They're stuck in front of a computer all day. They're not getting nothing out of it. And the new norm is not great for educational purposes.
No. And I also think, without having to dwell on this, because it becomes exhausting, is that, we're these kind of pack animals, right? We are a social pack species. Yeah. And I miss that interaction. I moved to New York for the inspiration and to be surrounded by that energy that inspired me through other people and contact with other people. And I think that is, for me, one of the biggest tragedies out of all this. And I would say to our daughters as well, like, to see them being stripped of like a key element of who they become and how they develop and who they are. Listen, some kids, like, we have a friend he loves it. He's like, loves being like just home with his parents all day. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, but I know my daughter is not that person and thrives in the social environment. And so do I. So that part I want, listen, I just, like anyone, we want to get through this quickly as possible. But for me, that's the thing I miss the most.
Yeah. With work, do you have an actual studio or an office you work out of, or is it more home-based always?
Well, we built this office last October, November, And it was meant to be this kind of incubator space, right?
Yeah.
This kind of place where we had events, where we had trunk shows and brought in, new businesses and had conversations with people. And it was a place in Manhattan in the West Village where we could meet face to face with people. And then, of course, that's all gone away. And we don't know when that's going to be up and running again. And so we dismantled that office this summer. I said, listen, we need to pull out of that, step back. And once the dust settles with all this stuff, rethink what's the next step with all that. Because a big part of our business, and I would say the magazine business in general, is a real social business.
Yeah.
And it's about face-to-face. It's about group engagement. And if the fact that we can't have that right now, we just decided to let's be smart. Let's divest in that and, get back to the kitchen table for a little bit.
And this is, it's going to be the new norm. A lot of office buildings over the last 3 months, a lot of people, like my wife, has worked from home. She set up a home office. She's been working from home for 3 months now. And there's really no need to go back to the office, especially when you have everything set up at home. So it's going to change the way a lot of people interact, a lot of people socialize. So, and especially like you, that socialization is needed. So it's just to have to rethink, I guess the easy way to rethink how the new norm changes everything, right?
Well, I think that was the power of Instagram. We looked and we saw this engagement that, people were looking to be connected to other people. Mm-hmm. And that's I was saying to Yolanda, I noticed that as things started opening, you saw the engagement decline a little bit on the Instagram, right? But before, it was just infectious. People were just like, give me more. We want to see what you're doing. Where are you? Let's create this dialogue. And you could just tell that we all needed each other.
Yeah.
We needed escape, or we needed advice, or my friend Nino was doing these little cooking videos that were so amazing. And, that's how we socialized.
Does your wife Yolanda have a social media presence too? Does she heavily have her own site to push her magazine as well?
Yeah. So it's, she has her personal Instagram, which is at Yolanda Edwards. Okay. And then it's at YOLO Journal.
YOLO Journal. Okay.
And that she's feverishly Instagramming. she's probably listening to me, so I'll say it. She's very good at it. And
it's an art. It's an art, and it's constantly changing. And you're and there's so much content, so much millions and millions of individuals trying to get people's attention. So it's so hard to grasp that attention, like you said, and you have to be constantly changed. Like a business, you constantly change, you're constantly modifying, you're constantly working to get that engagement. It's a job. It's a full-time job.
Well, it'd be easier if I had an amazing set of abs, and I could just post just pictures of me shirtless, but that isn't going to happen.
But that's a huge gimmick, right? It's a huge part of Instagram where you got individuals, female, male, that are attractive, but is that really a true following? Are they really engaged, or are it's just people liking it, right? So it's then the engagement part of it. I think what you're doing, you're building is more raw, more real, right? It's something that people want to see and learn how to do a drink, or which is you're offering real engagement, not just a simple picture of look at my rear and but that's what a huge part of social media is, right?
I know. And it's people have created quote unquote careers based on butt cheeks.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
That, I don't know. That's not the lane that I picked to follow or go down, or
I'm a strong believer in is you pick your lane, like you said, and you just constantly just keep working, and it just grows. Let it organically grow, and you start building this audience, and that audience grows. Last question I'm going to have for you. I don't want to take too much more of your time, Matt. With everything you're building right now, would TV be something you would look into again?
I love the moving image. I love doing that TV. There's been some interest now with Man in His Car. Like, is there potential to develop that into a series? I think how we look at moving image has changed dramatically since I grew up with television. And I even think the failings of Esquire was that they forgot that it was this device that was the future of how people saw moving image.
They had so much momentum for a little while.
But they were on an old school format, and it was difficult to find, and people don't have cable television anymore. Very few people do. And so, like, I think, yes, the short answer is I've always appreciated and enjoyed the moving image, and walking away and learning so much from doing that show. I thought was really inspiring. And I think there is a deficit of good quality stuff. I think there's, and I think Netflix is a great example of the reaction to that. Based, rather than just like regular kind of legacy television. But I really enjoy doing it. I like bringing the storytelling to life, bringing it off the page and into that. So yeah, if I think if the opportunity was there, I would be all over it.
How's your thoughts on the Jay Leno show?
On Jay Leno?
The Jay Leno show, the car show he has.
So I've only seen it a couple times, but I'll tell you this. I met Jay and interviewed him for the book.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Okay. And not only is his car collection just one of the most spectacular.
Oh, it's incredible. It's insane.
He is really, truly one of the nicest, funniest guys I've ever met in my life. I recorded all of my interviews on the iPhone.
Yeah.
And I am laughing like my ass off during his story, which is so great. And I never really had that connection to him before, but I think he's an incredibly generous and funny guy. And his story is one of my favorite in the book. And I had not heard that story before. So I hope it's a fresh story for a lot of Jay fans.
He's so passionate about his cars. It's insane. And it's something where it's not something where it just started. This is something he's had forever. You hear his stories, which is incredible. I love it. Yeah. That's interesting. That's a big name you have in your book too, right?
Yeah, that was a real. I mean, it's such a pleasure to have that. You got to kiss the Jay Leno ring in the car world,
Yeah.
And the fact that he allowed me into that world for whatever that afternoon was very.
So it was an in-person interview?
Yeah, I was in LA. I went in his garage and we chose the car.
So as you actually went into his garage, you saw all the cars you got a tour of his place.
Dude, I was let to roam around by myself in there.
So he's got how many cars in there? Over 200 cars, huh?
I know. It's like a football field. It's like a hangar.
Yeah.
And, and he's like, hey, do you want to take a ride in a steam engine car? And I'm like, yeah, well, yeah. So it was pretty special. And in general, all the people that let me into their little world to talk about the thing that was so intimate to them, that's a very, very special.
Who was your favorite story in your whole book?
Listen, I think the Jay Leno one is great. I think the Ralph Lauren one is great. I think
Ralph Lauren, yeah. He's a car guy too, huh?
Car guy. Ed Burns, actor director.
Yeah.
His muscle car story as a kid growing up on Long Island is epic. My buddy Paolo, who's a car, he's a professor of media and car and design, and his favorite car is the Fiat Panda, 30 horsepower Fiat Panda, and I traveled to Italy to photograph that thing, and my friend Alexander Kraft, who has these crazy customized Range Rovers and Ferraris, and again, the common thread to the story is that
a passion and love for cars.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited. This has been an absolute pleasure having you on, Matt. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule, your busy schedule, to be on the show. And hopefully, when your book comes out, maybe we can get you back on and talk a bit more. A bit more about your book. And all the show notes, I'm going to put all of Matt and his wife Yolanda's contact information, social media, how to purchase his book, how to subscribe to his magazine, and where to pick it up. And this has been an absolute pleasure getting to know you and diving into who you are and your little history and your story. So I appreciate that. you want to say bye to everyone?
Bye, everybody. And Jeff, next time I'm in Toronto, I hope we could have a face-to-face.
100%.
Just keep the Molson cold for me, okay?
I'll do that, buddy. Thank you very much,
Okay.
bro. That's a wrap for today. I want to thank Matt for taking time in his busy schedule to be a guest on our show. That was an honor having him on. Excited to have him back on, hopefully when his new book is released in October. If you enjoy this episode just as much as I did, please tell friends, tell your family. We're trying to build something special here. Leave a review. 5 stars would be absolutely amazing. Until next week, always move forward.